Hello, I'm Pat Greaves. My father was Chris Daniels. His real name was Alec Greaves, but Chris Daniels was his on-air name, his stage name, on WKY-TV, basically from 1952 until 1983. Dad was hired right out of college. He had just finished his master's degree at OU and was looking for a career in television or radio. Dad was blessed with a great voice. He actually sang at weddings and did some commercial voiceovers. His actual first radio or broadcasting job was KNOR radio in Norman. In the 50s, or I'm sorry, in the late 40s, he'd actually helped with some of the OU football radio broadcasts, and then later on he actually did the color for OU, which I'll get into later. Anyway, Dad's name, Chris Daniels, came about. My oldest brother is Daniel, and my next older brother is Chris, so that he just took the name Chris Daniels, which made sense, and then I came along later, and then a younger brother, Kurt, also. But again, people knew my dad his whole life pretty much as Chris Daniels. His voice was basically discovered, and when he auditioned to be a staff announcer at WKY, right before he was hired in '52, they said, "You've got the voice, you're hired." And of course, I'm sure Dad was thrilled. He worked alongside some real great, announcing pioneers: Bill Fountain, Wakefield Holly, Gene Dillahay, Maury Ferguson, Wilson Hurst. I'm sure I'm leaving out a few, but Dad was one of the original on-air pioneers. Later on in his career, actually, and probably in the early '60s, he was the guy every night on Channel 4 that said, "It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are?" And many people to this day still remember that phrase. In fact, it was actually nominated for an Emmy. Dad being one of the staff announcers, it really was a very interesting concept. From the earliest time that I remember, which is probably about 3 years old, maybe 4, so that would have been about 56 or 57. Dad would, along with the other staff announcers, would go in the live announcers booth, which was above the studio there by the control room. And they would literally do and say all of the station IDs, basically from sign on to sign off. And if I remember, sign on was about 6 or 7 a.m. and sign off was always midnight. And of course they were televising, broadcasting in more color programming. That came along slowly through the 50s and increased from the original, of course, black and white programming. But again, when I was about 3 years old, the first time I remember being in that live announcers booth, Dad would grab my arm, literally, and he would say, "Now don't make a sound. When that on-air light comes on, we are live on the air." And boy, I remember that. That was burned in my brain, like a branding iron. But Dad would say, "This is WKY-TV Channel 4 in Oklahoma City, reminding you to fasten your seatbelt, or reminding you to, don't be a litter bug," whatever, all the old phrases from the 50s and 60s that we all remember. It really was a different time, though. Dad's first on-air program, actually, and of course he did live commercials and obviously read live announcements and scripts, but he was chosen to do the Deputy Chris TV show in I believe it was about 1954. That lasted about 3 years. It was prior to the Foreman Scotty show. So Dad would come on in the afternoon, and of course, again, everything was live, and he would be basically the host for the Hopalong Cassidy, and later on, I think the Gene Autry Singing Cowboy TV show. So he would be he would host them, but he would also do like a little skit And as you're seeing on the screen now, there's some pictures of Dad with his Winchester rifle and the tough look. You know, he's going to get the bandit, so it was kind of in between the program. And I barely remember that. Of course, my two older brothers would have a clearer memory of that. Then in 1957, as I said, that Deputy Chris show was not on the air anymore. Foreman Scotty started, and Dad, of course, was well established by then, obviously. And he would play kind of recurring roles, bit parts, so to speak, in the Foreman Scotty show. And I remember he was an English tax collector. I can't remember his name, but then one character I do remember of Dad's was Mr. Wing. And Mr. Wing was a Chinese laundryman who would come and deliver laundry to the Circle 4 Ranch. Now that's a stretch, but that was the character. And I remember vividly going down to the Colonial Costume Shop, which is on about Northwest 6th and Classen, just west of downtown. And he asked me to help him pick out his costume for that Mr. Wing character. And again, I remember it like it was yesterday. So I helped Dad pick out the little, coolie satin shirt, or the long Chinese garment, whatever it's called, and the little hat. And Dad grew up and came on the scene during the time that diction and pronunciation was extremely important. Not that it's not now, but not nearly as much. He was actually an English and speech double major. In fact, he got a master's in English. So he actually was studying his craft, or honing his craft, prior to him being hired, and it served him well in life. He would walk up to a friend of mine or a neighbor and start talking, and that you just immediately knew. And he wasn't phony about it. Dad had a very natural voice, and many of you hopefully that will remember his voice. It was very distinctive, as was the other staff announcers, the Wakefield Hollies, Bill Fountains, etc. And again, that was very important. One of the things that I remember and has been called to my attention, he would not say WKY, he would say WKY, Channel 4, Oklahoma City. The W was very important in how that was pronounced. It was kind of, again, a pet peeve of his for people to mispronounce it. Dad actually doubled being on the air on WKY radio as well as WKY-TV. A lot of memories there too. From the time I was about 5 years old, I would look forward so much when I guess I was old enough. Dad would actually take me in on like Friday nights. It was almost always a Friday night. He would seem like he had fairly frequent either Friday night or Saturday night booth announcer assignments, and I would look forward to that so much. So I'd come home from school, and then at 4 o'clock we'd go out to the station, and it was really neat. I would get to hang out there in the control room and walk around and see a lot of the live shows being done, and talk to the cameraman. I mean, everybody was really engaging. It's not the same now. You can't just walk into your employees' kids just can't walk into a TV station or a control room now like they used to do. But then I would go upstairs, and especially in the early 60s, maybe mid 60s, I would sit in the in the control room upstairs where radio was, and would listen to like Ronnie K, and I'd hear people like Bo Nance and Ross Porter, Jim Palmer, some of those guys, some of the pioneers, and actually I remember former Congressman Ernest Istook, who went by Jim Istook on the air. I would listen to them do their news, and the old AP wire machine, which of course they had downstairs in the newsroom on TV, but also upstairs in radio. I remember the clack, 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 clack of the wire, the old wire machine tapping out the news, and boy, that would fascinate me, watching it type out the print. And of course, remember, this is the 60s. This is way before even fax machines, and certainly way before computers or cell phones or any of the instantaneous electronic ways of transmitting things that we have now. So again, really was a different time. Dad was also called out quite a few times to do live shows along with Foreman Scotty and of course Danny Williams, 3D Danny. They would go, I mean, many times we'd ride the little train from the station out to Frontier City. That's about a 2.5 mile drive. Of course, the little Frontier City or Channel 4, whatever it was, train would pull the kids, and that was a lot of fun. And there would be all kinds of live stand-up promotions that they would do for various sponsors. And again, things that they really don't do now very much. Dad, again, I'd mentioned about him being on Deputy Chris from approximately 53 to 57. Then that show was off the air for about 5 years when Foreman Scotty show was really in its infancy, but also, of course, gained a real foothold. Then in 1962, a lot of you will probably remember, he was Scoop O'Brien. He was basically the newspaper reporter. They would introduce the Superman adventure for the day, and then after all the Superman series had run out, which took approximately a year, then he did the Lone Ranger, and he, of course, announced that. And again, I remember we would go upstairs in what they called the observation deck or observation tower. He would load the film up for that day's episode, and then play it through and kind of write himself or type himself out a script that he would go by. But remember, they didn't have teleprompters then, so everything was pretty much memorized. And that was the old days in television. You memorized your script, you memorized your live programming. Of course, now if it was a news program or a commercial, you obviously had a script, but you would look down. So if you go back into the old days of television, both the national and the local programs, you'll see the talent looking down and then back up. Of course, now that would be very strange looking because, of course, teleprompters, you're looking into the camera the whole time. As technology improved and of course increased there into the early 70s basically, Dad's staff announcer, live booth announcer position, along with the other great voices, were pretty much eliminated at that point because videotape came in, and of course then everything could be pre-recorded. And so with that transition, Dad actually was approached by station management, and I am confident that it was Norman Bagwell, that was the station manager at the time, approached Dad about being public service director, which is sort of a community affairs position, and he was a natural for that. Dad was so gregarious and such a people person, literally never met a stranger, and of course he fit in so perfectly with the WKY family. It truly was a family, and anyone that ever worked there, especially in that golden age in the 50s, 60s, 70s, can tell you that was the case. Everyone got along. They did things socially together. I remember vividly some weekend parties that a lot of times he would leave my brothers and I at my grandparents' house, but sometimes Mom and Dad would take us along to these weekend parties at various people's houses, and many of them were WKY employees. So we went on picnics together. We had, like I said, these weekend parties. Our kids, if we didn't go to school together and played baseball and so forth, we knew each other, and we did things socially. So it really was a special time. And Dad, of course, segued and moved right along, blended in with the new technology, and although he was still very much a kind of a pencil and paper guy, his smooth announcing style and his people-pleasing gregariousness really did serve him well his whole life. As we go into the 70s and 80s, the community service, or actually the public service director post that he filled at that time, really it was required by Channel 4 and by the FCC to justify each broadcast station's license. So Dad was, in essence, kind of responsible for keeping Channel 4 on the air. So needless to say, that was an important position. And he still did a lot of announcing and scripts, and he was the voice for many businesses through the years, some car dealerships. I remember the old Burrell Homes Ford. He did Billy Lee Pies. I'm of course talking about businesses that haven't been around for forever. I think he did some Emmer Brothers, you know, all kinds of sponsorships. So he still was active in both the radio and the television. So Dad had the public affairs, the public service position from about 1971 until his retirement in 1983. And of course, Dad again loved the positions that he had. He loved the announcing. He loved being in the public eye. But Dad really was a humble guy. Although again, he loved being on camera and loved being in the public eye. He was very. He never was arrogant. Dad truly had the Will Rogers mentality. He never met a man he didn't like, and he certainly never met a stranger. He would engage total strangers of all socioeconomic levels in conversation, because again, that's just what Dad did. He loved being around people and talking about everything. And as Dad did retire in 1983, he kind of continued on his own to be in front of people and serve people. He had numerous visits. In fact, I think in his probably last 10 years, he visited especially former Channel 4 employees, or even some of the other stations, people that he knew that were shut in, like in nursing homes or whatever. He would visit them on a regular basis. Never ever asked for a penny of compensation. He just did it on his own. Again, he loved to do that, and he loved to serve people. And again, being in the public eye, I remember a story back in about, I would have been about 3rd or 4th grade. So this would have been about probably 62, maybe 63. And he was on the air with the Scoop O'Brien Superman show. He walked into my grade school, Putnam Heights Elementary. We lived right off of 34th Street by the school. And he would walk in, and of course everybody, kind of went nuts. It's like, oh wow, look who's here! It's a celebrity. There's Chris Daniels, or the kids probably, calling him Scoop O'Brien. And Dad loved that people recognized him. But again, he was so down to earth. I mean, that's the word that you could describe Dad. He was just a regular person, but he really wore both hats well. And as he did retire in later years, all the personal time that he spent with people and of course with his family was the most that he spent. He never missed any of my kids' baseball or basketball or football games. He must have gone to 150 of them. Everyone that I was there, Dad was there, and he loved being with his family. One thing I forgot to mention, I actually worked at WKY Radio, just as Dad did. I worked there from 1978 to 1980. So that was pretty ironic in the whole scheme of things. And kind of a fitting tribute to Dad in a way, and a fitting way to close, I guess, his career, and as it turned out, his life, was in December, right around Christmas time. A good friend of mine, Mike Rogers, who is the Road King Rogers on KTOK Radio, some of you may know him, arranged. He had a great interest in television and the old broadcasting and so forth, and got to know my dad and arranged a studio tour there with Channel 4. So that I thought was, Dad was right back in his old stomping grounds and his old, home turf, and I thought that was a really neat and fitting way for Dad to kind of sail off into the sunset.